We are going to look again at those numbers coming in from the state of Florida, and to help us do it, we're going over to that map and to Hal Bruno. Hal, what is left to come in?
Judy, the lead has been cut down to about 20,000 Bush over Gore in Florida. And what is outstanding is basically Democratic territory along the Gold Coast. Let's look at the map here. All right, it's this area here from Miami up to West Palm Beach. Now, 26% of what's outstanding is from Broward County, and that's heavily Jewish and that's heavily Democratic. 45% is from Dade County. Now, Dade County splits two ways. Part of it is African American, which is Democratic. Part of it is Cuban American, which is Republican. We don't know which part of it is still outstanding. But the thing is, Florida has gotten so close now that there's just absolutely no way of counting it until probably every last vote is in.
We did hear Mary Madeline say, and then earlier tonight, Carl, we've heard other folks who represent the Bush campaign say that they are still optimistic, that they think there are either enough absentee votes, enough of a Republican presence in those areas to give the state to George W. Bush.
Yeah, they've got two reasons to be optimistic. One is it could be some of that outstanding vote is from the districts that are Cuban American, which is Republican, and a lot of it could be absentee, which tends to be Republican. On the other hand, Gore's got some reason for optimism too, because some of what's outstanding is from very solid Democratic territory.
And tell us again, Hal, how long may it be before we know the answer to how Florida goes?
1 hour, 14 minutes, and 20 seconds. Judy, I don't have the slightest idea how long it's going to be.
Hope springs eternal, Hal. All right, we said there are 4 states out. We've said it over and over again. It is the state of Florida with the 25 votes. That is the crucial state. And there is Iowa, Wisconsin, and Oregon. And Bill Schneider, you've been looking at some exit polls.
Well, we've looked at some exit polls in Florida. And what we find in Florida is that Jewish voters are about 80% Democratic. Blacks are about 90% Democratic. You know, Hal mentioned the Cuban American vote. People think that most Hispanic voters in Florida are Cuban Americans. In fact, a lot of them are not. The Hispanic vote in Florida in our exit poll is breaking just about 50-50 for Bush and Gore, which has got to be good news for Gore, because Bush is probably counting on a heavy Cuban American vote, which is historically Republican. But a lot of Hispanic women, particularly in Florida, have been voting Democratic in recent elections. So it looks like the Hispanic vote is not as reliably Republican as it used to be in Florida.
This Hispanic vote in Florida, we've learned, is a vote. These are people who have come from other parts of Latin and South America, people from Central America, South America.
That's right.
We also know that the Cuban second and third generation vote is not as Republican as the older.
Now, the guessing was that the Elian Gonzalez issue might have driven a lot of Cuban Americans back to the Republican Party, because they split pretty closely between Clinton and Dole last time. But it appears that the Hispanic vote in Florida, which is concentrated in South Florida, where Hal said the vote is still out, that vote is splitting a lot closer than people expected it to.
I would just make one other point, that this, for some of us, this is very reminiscent of 1976. There was no question that Carter had won the popular vote, but it was in the middle of the night or in early morning when the votes from Mississippi and Ohio came in, both states in a matter of a few thousand votes, that put Jimmy Carter into the White House. So when Judy plaintively asked, when will we know, history may not be kind to your hopes for an end to this.
I have some information. The Florida election authorities report that it is likely that close to 1 million absentee ballots were sent out statewide in Florida. Almost all of them, including the absentee ballots, will be counted by 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, including the overseas ballots, military and non-military, that were received by Election Day. 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, they say almost all of them will be counted.
And it's just 1:45 Eastern time, so we may only have an hour and 45 minutes to go.
Well, one man who won't go to sleep is a man in Aurora, Illinois, the Speaker of the House of Representatives in Washington. When we come back, Dennis Hastert will join us. Our coverage continues.
We are back. It's 1:46 Eastern Time. We're still waiting to find out who the next president of the United States will be. We can tell you that CNN does estimate, well, before I give you the turnout estimate, let me show you what the raw vote numbers are. 83% of the precincts reporting across the nation. George W. Bush, 42.1 million votes, 49%. To Al Gore's 41.4 million, 48%. This is one close election.
650,000 votes spread out of 83.5 million votes cast.
We can tell you on the turnout, and I don't know whether we're going to show you any other numbers at this point, Ralph Nader, probably not. But I will. What we can tell you is that CNN is able to estimate that the turnout among the voting age population in the United States is going to be around 50%. Now, that is an increase from the turnout in 1996, the year of the last presidential election, but only a very slight increase. So all the reports we've been hearing all day long about how the voters are turning out in record numbers, Jeff Greenfield, as you're so fond of reminding me, let's wait and see how many people actually turn out.
We go through this every 2 or 4 years. In the middle of the day, people see long lines and they say record turnout, the experts are wrong. I mean, you think about this. 4 years ago, it was a slam dunk for Clinton to beat Dole. Everyone knew how that was going to come out. Now you have, and we've all been predicting, and it turns out these predictions were right, one of the closest elections in the history of the United States, and the turnout went from 49% in 1996 to 50% in the year 2000. That is not a huge vote of passion and interest in the political process when you think about this election.
Yes.
Now, there had been predictions that the turnout would be even lower, though. So if you're thinking in that direction, you could say this was an improvement. We want to go right now to our balance of power area over there across the newsroom to CNN's Wolf Blitzer for an update. Wolf.
Judy, we want to take a look at the U.S. Senate right now to see where that balance of power in the Senate is stacking up. In the U.S. Senate, there were 35 Republican holdovers, 31 Democrats. The Republicans have won 14 seats. The Democrats tonight have won 16 seats. That brings the total to what we know right now, 49 seats for the Republican, 47 seats for the Democrats. 4 seats are still undecided. The Democrats would have to win all 4 of those seats in order to become the majority in the Senate. Let's take a look and see how close those 4 seats are. In Missouri, right now, Mel Carnahan, who died in a plane crash 2 or 3 weeks ago, he is getting 51% of the vote to Senator John Ashcroft, the Republican incumbent, 49%. But look at that actual vote total, very close. In Michigan right now, the incumbent Republican Spencer Abraham, 51% to Debbie Stabenow, the Democratic challenger. But look at that number, still very close with only 68% of the voters tallied so far. In Nebraska, the open seat, Bob Kerrey vacated that seat. The Democrat, Ben Nelson, is slightly ahead of Don Stenberg, the Republican. But look at the number, with 82% reporting, very, very close. Only 6,000 votes or so making a difference in Nebraska so far. In Montana, Conrad Burns slightly ahead of the challenger, Brian Schweitzer, the Democrat. Once again, only 62% of that number is there. Let's talk to Stuart Rothenberg and see what's happening with those 4 Senate seats.
Well, Wolf, obviously these are just too close to call. It's amazing the narrow margins given the considerable votes already cast. Clearly, somebody like Conrad Burns is in better position. He's an incumbent. It's a conservative state. But none of these races look locked up at the moment.
It's going to be a long night for a lot of these races. They're going to be looking at absentee ballots. They're going to be looking at every precinct.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure you're going to have the legal teams flying out of there from the Democratic Senate Committee and the Republican Senate Committee to make sure they're checking with ballot security and recounts and soiled ballots, things like that. So I think, you know, some of these races could drag on indefinitely. And I just would add, Wolf, it's not just these races. I was noticing a couple of the House races. I would refer to a New Jersey race, Dick Zimmer against Rush Holt. And my computer showed 100% of the vote in, and I looked a few minutes later and saw 100% of the vote in still, in a slightly different result. The latest result actually has Rush Holt ahead of Dick Zimmer by 56 votes. I don't know if that's a final or just a preliminary final.
Although we will recap, we are projecting that the Republicans will maintain the majority in the House of Representatives. Back to Judy on the National Desk.
All right, Wolf, thanks to you and thanks to Stu Rothenberg. A little while ago, we were in Aurora, Illinois, speaking with the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Dennis Hastert. We're going to go back to him now